Okay, so now that we've had a look at the rig and you know what the rig looks like, and I assume you've watched the theory video, so you have some idea of how we're going to tackle this, and hopefully you've also looked at some reference of scorpions walking, so you know what a real scorpion walk feels like. Now, if you look in this week's materials, you'll find a project brief, and this tells you basically how to animate the scorpion walk cycle. What we want to do really is animate just one leg and then copy that throughout the rig. Now we're on a 16 frame cycle, which of course we can change later on to make it faster or slower. But for now we're going to stick to this, follow this recipe, make it work, and then we can always go back and change things later. So first thing we're going to do is set our timeline from 1 to 17, just like it says in the instructions. And what we want to do is basically take this front left leg and we'll move that forward for the contact position, set a keyframe, then I'm going to move it, actually it should be, the next thing I'll do actually is a middle mouse drag that to frame 17, because of course 1 and 17 will be the same. Then at frame 9, I'm going to hold down the shift key and I'm going to move that leg back, and then at 13 I'm going to lift it up a bit off the ground so that it moves forward, and that's what we should end up with. Now I'm not totally loving that. I think that's oops, if I hit spacebar there. Now the setup we want is layouts, 3 panes, split top. At the bottom we want our graph editor, which should be here under panels, graph editor, there we go. Here I'm going to be panels perspective, and there I'll be panels perspective as well for now. I'm going to hit 6, so we go into textured mode. I'm going to go to show none, and then show NURBS, curves, and polygons. That's all I want to see, is NURBS, curves, and polygons. So show none, NURBS, curves, the control curves, polygons, the surface geometry. So that's what we need. And so now let's just make sure that we're happy with this leg. So it doesn't really feel like it's traveling very far. So why don't we pull that a bit further up, a bit further forward there, which means we've got to middle mouse drag that to frame 17 as well, and then hit S so that 1 and 17 are the same. And okay, that's a little more convincing for a leg moving forward. So maybe we'll even move it a little bit further back, something like that, and hit S. Now we also need to check those curves, especially the translate Z curve, because when that leg is moving backwards along the ground, we want that curve to be completely flat, because this should be an imaginary treadmill. So I'm going to flatten that out like that, so it's completely straight. Now the other thing I want to do is turn on my infinity curves, because we're going to do an endless walk cycle, and then we'll add a translation on the world mover to have the scorpion move forward. And in order to do that, we need our infinity curves to be working. So curves, pre-infinity cycle, curves, post-infinity cycle. And now to view those infinity curves, view infinity on. Okay, now you'll see we've got a bit of a bump here at the top, so I need to look at my translate Z, and I need to flatten that curve there, so there's a bit of a slow in. This is the bit where the foot is coming forward, bit of a slow in there, and actually I'm going to break this tangent, break tangent, because we want a slow in here, but not there, because this one should be totally straight, because that's the bit where the foot is moving under the scorpion. So this is the eternal treadmill bit, just like you're walking in the gym. Your feet are going back because the ground is traveling under you. So that's your forward momentum, and that should be totally constant. Here, when the foot comes forward, we can have an ease in at the beginning and the end. So there's our foot. So 1 foot traveling. And now that I've done that and I'm happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and save it. You always want to save. Whenever you get to a happy position, something that's working, go ahead and save your work. So once we've got 1 foot working, we're now going to want to basically copy and paste that curve onto the other feet. So I'm going to go ahead and go up to that the top of that node, hit A, and drag select all of those curves and go to Edit, Copy, and then I'm going to select the next foot or the last foot on the left hand side, and that actually shouldn't have any keyframes on it. I'm going to delete that and go to frame 1 and hit S so that we set keyframes. There seems to be a keyframe there. I'm not sure what that is. I'm going to turn that off. Or rather delete it. And so here we've set a key at frame 1, and now I want to select that key and go to Edit, Paste, and that will that should in theory have set my. That should in theory, if I hit A, have animated that foot, but it hasn't actually done it. So why is that? For some reason that didn't paste correctly. So I'm not quite sure why that happened, but I think what we'll do is go ahead and delete that, then go back to frame 1, hit S again, and now let me try that one more time. Edit, paste. Nope, that still isn't working. So what may have happened, let's just go through our, let's go back to frame 1. So that's the curve that should have pasted. That's what we should have. Those 3 channels there, and for some reason that didn't paste correctly. So I'm gonna select it all again. Go to Edit, Copy. Then I'm going to go back to this one. Copying and pasting curves in Maya can be tricky. It can be frustrating. So now I'm just going to select those 3 channels and go Edit, Paste. Try that one more time. Okay, now it's worked. As I sit here doing this demonstration, I don't know why it didn't work the first time and did work the second time. All I can tell you is that one of the things that Maya doesn't really do very well is copy and paste curves. It's often fiddly, and you often have to do it several times before you get it right. What I'm going to do here is turn on my infinity curves, pre-infinity cycle, post-infinity cycle. Make sure view infinity is turned on. So now we can cycle those infinitely. Now, we've successfully copied the curves, but one thing that isn't quite right is this foot is getting too extended at the end at frame 9. So I want to take that whole translate Z curve and move it up slightly. So I'm going to select the whole curve, make sure I'm in the Move tool, hold down the Shift key with my left hand, and then using the middle mouse, I'm going to pull it up slightly, and then try that. So that looks a little better. Actually, maybe down a little bit. That doesn't look too bad. So now, having done that, I'm going to go ahead and paste the same curve onto this foot here. Once again, I'm going to go to frame 1. I'm going to delete all the information that's there. I'm going to hit S. I'm going to go to these 3 channels and go to Edit, Paste. Okay, and that looks like it has successfully pasted. But now I don't want these 3 feet working in unison. This middle set of legs has to be offset by 8 frames from the other. from the other two. 8 frames because it's half of the 16 frame cycle. So selecting those curves with my mouse, or rather the Wacom as I'm using, hold down the shift key, middle mouse, drag 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 frames. Turn on infinity curves, pre-infinity cycle, post-infinity cycle. You have to do this for every curve, I'm afraid. And now we've got something that's looking much more interesting. However, we've obviously got some problems because we've got some intersections here with these 2 feet. Now, what that means is that all of my curves the Z translation on all of my curves are too big. So this scorpion is actually taking excessively large steps, because I think that if I select this middle curve, no matter what I do with it, even if I try to, wait a minute, we want this foot here, don't we? The middle foot. If I select that curve, and even if I move it up to get it out of the way of that foot, it's going to collide with the front foot. So I'm going to have to shorten this curve slightly, annoyingly. So I'm going to have to select 1 and 7 and just pull them, just pull them back a little bit. And that means that I'm also going to have to do the same thing with the back foot. Hit A, and let's go to 17. I'm also going to have to pull that one back a bit, and the front foot as well. I'm going to have to pull that back a bit. So they've all got to be slightly shorter, and the reason for that, that's still too long. I think what I may have to do is actually go back. I think I'm actually going to have to delete all of this. So I'm going to delete the animation on the two these 2 feet, the second and the third foot, and I'm going to have to go back and to the beginning one, and I'm going to have to make this this curve less long. So actually, my instincts at the beginning to have the step be slightly smaller were actually correct. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so a smaller step seems to work better. All right, now I'm going to select those curves, drag select them, go to edit, copy, and now I'm going to go to the back foot, go back, whoops. Actually, I'll do the second one. I'll do them in turn. Let's go to frame 1. Let's pull that foot back there. Hit S, select those curves, and go to edit, paste. Turn on those infinity curves, and see what we've got. Okay. Now we've got to offset it all by 8 frames like we did before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now we should have those feet working in opposition to each other. Now I'm just going to take that translate Z and move it up slightly, just so it's slightly, move that whole curve so it's slightly closer to the front foot. Okay, that's starting to look all right. So I'm reasonably happy with that. Now I'm going to do the back foot. Go to frame 1, hit a key, grab those keys, grab those 3 channels that we want to paste, edit, paste. Select those keys, curves, pre-infinity cycle, curves, post-infinity cycle. So now I've had to do this twice, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it does show you that these things are tricky to get right. Until you've got all 3 legs working, you don't know how big the steps should be. So we had to go back and adjust that first curve, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, one thing I'm noticing, I'm going to go to the orthographic side view here, is that we're actually not on the ground plane. So one thing we need to do is select the world mover and just pull our scorpion down a bit so his feet are resting on the ground. There we go. Because we want those feet to be on the ground at all times. Now I can see that this middle foot here is actually going to have to come down. I should flatten that out. This Y translation is going to have to come down because it's actually not correct. So let's have a look at it here. Okay. That looks all right. Now let's go back to that view and have a look. Okay, great. So now we've got those three legs working. They're all touching the ground, and they're all working in opposition to one another. So now that I've got that moving reasonably happily, I'm going to go ahead and save it. So File, Save Scene As, Scorpion Walk 3, and save. And in the next video, I'll show you how to copy that over onto the other side.